Okay, portfolio return. Expected return on the portfolio. The book uses this notation, the R sub P with a little hat over it. I simply just use this notation, so they mean the same thing. So portfolio return, our expected portfolio return, is simply the weight multiplied by the expected return uh, of that security. So we have any number of securities, and we take the weight. The weight is determined by the market value of that investment. So um, we have, again, there are homework problems where you are given values of investments. So the weight is the percentage of that investment as a portion of the total portfolio value. Uh, we take the we take those the the weight multiplied by the expected return, or each of the individual assets. We sum them up, and that gives us the expected return on the portfolio. Um, so weighted average expected return gives us that value for all the stocks held in a portfolio. So, so portfolio returns, the realized rate of return is the rate of return that's actually earned. The actual return, we again when we're talking about the robust standard deviation, or the standard deviation we calculate when we're trying to estimate returns. We use the R with the little two dots over it. That's the realized rate of return. The actual return is going to differ from the expected return because things happen that were unforeseen. So the market doesn't know everything's going to take place with regard to a firm. Uh, so correlation coefficient measures the degree of relationship between two variables. Uh, the we're not going to calculate the correlation coefficient in this chapter, but it's important to understand. Positively correlated stocks, they have rates of return that move in the same direction. This is not necessarily desirable. So if we have high positive correlation, it's hard to diversify our portfolio. We want what we want is ideally is negatively correlated uh, stocks. So the correlation coefficient less than zero. We have rates that move in opposite direction. This allows us to diversify away our firm-specific risk. This can also be achieved with lower positive correlations, but ideally negative is going to reduce our volatility the most. So risk reduction. So we're going to combine stocks that are not perfectly correlated. This is going to reduce the risk of our portfolio. So as we add stocks, the risk is going to be reduced. Each stock we add is going to reduce that to some extent. We're going to see a chart, I believe, on the following page that shows how that works and so forth. So riskiness of a portfolio reduce as you increase the number of stocks. The smaller the positive correlation, the lower the risk. So as I mentioned before, negative correlation is optimal, but if we have just the fact that stocks are uncorrelated is a good thing. We wouldn't want a correlation coefficient close to 1 with regard to all of our stocks. Again, the greater the negative correlation, the lower the risk. With negative correlation, we're going to be able to reduce our risk with much quicker. Truthfully, most stocks are most stocks are positively correlated to some extent. Very few are actually negatively correlated. So just the negatively correlated assets are actually kind of hard to come by. That's saying that they're not assets that are stocks that are not subject to market risk. So here we have portfolio risk. The y-axis here is standard deviation. The x-axis is stocks. So here we have say for up to 15% or up to 15% risk. That is basically our systematic risk. Everything above that is our firm-specific or diversifiable risk, the risk we can reduce by diversifying away. So as we add stocks, we reduce that risk. So you see here at 10, we've eliminated a considerable portion of it. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 40, 50 stocks, it is believed that you can diversify away virtually all of the firm-specific risk. So firm-specific risk versus market risk, talked about this in the first section a little bit. The firm-specific risks are part of the securities risk associated with random outcomes generated by events or behaviors of the specific firm. Earnings reports, new products released, bankruptcy, any sort of thing like that would be firm-specific risk. Firm-specific risk can be eliminated through proper diversification, also called diversifiable or unsystematic risk. So probably the most common term for referring to firm-specific risk is called unsystematic risk. So market risk, the part of the securities risk that cannot be eliminated through diversification because it's associated with economic or market factors that systematically affect almost all firms. So the one thing that we can do with regard to market risk in investing outside of that market. So we can diversify. That could be, for example, investing in foreign companies, foreign stocks, and so forth, but also investing outside of the market. For example, investing in real estate, something of that nature might provide some diversification away from market risk. So that's also called non-diversifiable or systematic risk, and that's systematic risk is the most widely used term here. So the book uses the term relevant risk to refer to market risk, and that's a risk associated that can't be with a security, can't be diversified away. The risk like support the securities contribution to total risk of portfolio. Irrelevant risk is our unsystematic risk, and that is the risk associated with the security that can be diversified away.